And our strategy is going to be to sell directly to hospital labs because they're a very well-defined group. We know how to reach them. And this is since it's such a small instrument, a low-cost instrument, the distribution can be very efficient compared to what a typical molecular diagnostic company is doing. We also, the reimbursement codes are in place. It's reimbursed per target, so it's very favorable to the hospital to be able to have multiple targets on one disc. And the market survey we did showed that at $100 a test, which gives us a very good margin, that the hospital labs, the adoption rate will be quite high, about 25% for the fungal test and over 90% for the bacterial test. So the quality of care is the name of the game here, and doctors and patients obviously very willing to adopt it, but the hospital as a system can greatly improve the quality of care by having better outcomes and not misusing antibiotics. Because we have such a small platform, it's very easy to distribute, it's easy to maintain, it's going to be a totally different service model where you just send the platform back. If there's trouble with it, there's no cold chain. That's revolutionary. Almost every multi-X platform has some kind of cold chain, which makes kit shipping and storage very expensive. This is just a quick look at the molecular diagnostic space. You can see it's a crowded space, but without a broad panel that is also sensitive and also fast, you're not going to be a sepsis platform, and that's why nothing's been approved except for T2, and that's our only competitor in the space. This is just comparisons of ratios of desirable traits, being radically faster, lower cost, and more sensitive and broader targets that sets us apart by quite a bit. As I said, I'm one of the founders. My co-founder is a Harvard biochemist that I work with at other sequencing companies, and Dick Carroll is our VP who's taking care of the clinical side. He's put over 7 different molecular products and various other products through the FDA. We have a very active and experienced board. They've all had molecular, either diagnostic company or molecular tools exits or reagent manufacturing exits, so they're very, very experienced. And we've been in business for 3 years. We've done a seed round so far, and we're doing a 506c offering on this current Series A round. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That is a big relief that you're doing a 506c. That means your presentation here this morning was legal after all. Any questions? Jeff?
So right now we're working with Yale, but one of the Yale the microbiology lab directors actually science advisors for us, so we can't do the formal FDA study there, but we're doing a pilot study there, and we're also working with the University of Rhode Island Hospital associated with Brown and Syracuse Lab Alliance, which is also
Bruce?
I'm sorry if you mentioned this already. The one-time recurring price. What is the device and what is it?
So the device, the process of less than $1,000 to build, we're going to sell it for $5,000, and that's because the market survey showed below 10 is essentially no resistance to purchasing, so capital barrier. The recurring revenue is the kit, the disposable kit. We're going to sell for $100. We make it for 15 to 25, depending on volume. That's how we can scale the volume, but we expect it to get down to about 15. There is a licensing fee of $10 that we're going to pay for the amplification technology.
Any other questions for John?
Last
question.
You ain't quick. Who are your funders, initial funders?
So initial funders were some private angels that were all life science executives that we met over the years of being in business, and Connecticut Innovations, which is a VC that's funded by some Connecticut bonds, but they're Connecticut-based.
Is the NIH?
Yes, we have an NIH SBIR grant for a what we call a SNP detection platform for TB. So our instrument can actually detect single-base changes in DNA. So not only can we ID the organism, we can say if it's a dangerous strain such as MRSA or something.
What stage of the SBIR are you?
It's just a phase 1 that we're just about completing. Probably next month it'll be completed. We'll apply for a phase.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Any of our attendees are welcome to discuss with any of the presenters immediately after the completion of our investor panel. So at this time, I'd like to invite up our panelists to join us on stage and to introduce Michael Lane, who will moderate the panel. Michael is a member of the board of directors of the Long Island Capital Alliance and the president and chief operating officer of Real Content Media, an integrated content company that creates, produces, and distributes content for all forms of media. His career has spanned nearly 30 years in financial services, during which time he's held senior executive positions in firms ranging from information technology and SaaS solutions at an early stage venture capital-backed companies to large publicly traded enterprises. Michael, you're up.
Makes it sound like I've done some really important things in my life, although I can't quite sport the best, so I'll have to say, this is all you get tonight. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thank you to the panelists. I think we're really going to appreciate the insights from these guys. We spent some time prepping on it, and these guys know kind of the industry, the space, and they know what you guys need as entrepreneurs to get things done. So let me introduce them. Our first panelist is Daniel Broyles. Mr. Broyles is a partner at Fundworks Capital, but he began his career as an engineer for Hobrecken, Hess, and Shaw. He also served as a senior executive of Epica Medical Innovations, responsible for capital raises, intellectual property management, FDA regulatory affairs, and M&A due diligence. Next, we have Russ Fine. Mr. Fine is a managing director at Corporate Fuel, a merchant bank overseeing $55 million in private equity funds. He's been on the boards of and interim CEO for a number of healthcare-related businesses. Russ has spent many years leading growth strategies and building professional organizations around entrepreneurial businesses. And lastly, we have Dr. Bruce Lieberthal. Dr. Lieberthal serves as the Chief Innovation Officer for Henry Schein. He manages and has P&L responsibility for Henry Schein's medical systems and the DDX business, which is the digital dental exchange. Bruce was also the founder of Direct Vision Software, the general manager of Discus Dental Software, and has been a leader in dental technology for 30 years. So again, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. So for the companies presenting today, I think it is really important to have a context of the industry that you're working with. Understanding the needs of the industry helps you develop that value proposition to help you sell into it. And the healthcare industry is a very broad yet very integrated industry, as you know. It covers a broad spectrum of treatment options, amongst other things, curative, preventative, rehabilitative, and palliative care. So very broad and approached by very different parts of the services. There's doctors, healthcare providers, there's technology providers. Many people service this industry. Just to give you a sense of the size, it is the nation's largest private sector industry. I know you hear us talk a lot about it. It's a sixth of the economy, but it is a huge industry. But more importantly, and for us in Long Island, it accounts for over 13% of the U.S. workforce. So it's very large from that perspective. And since 2007, healthcare has added over 2 million jobs. Now, just so you know, my stats may be a little behind because this was from a business case I did years ago, but I think that number continues to grow. Most other industries in that time frame have declined. So it is still in very big growth mode. And particularly for New York is one of the top 6 states for healthcare provider and employment growth, averaging 16% over that time period. So again, very important for what we're doing. The last thing I want to mention is that the major focus of this industry is around cost reduction. I think we know this. There's a lot of talk, we see it in our politics, about how healthcare costs continue to increase. So the industry is focused on this in a couple of ways. One is there's a move from a fragmented approach to care to a more consolidated and connective approach to care. So if you guys work with doctors in any form or fashion, you know that about 60% of them are moving to the big providers, the ProHealths, the Northwells, and others. And they're doing this so they can leverage the economies of scale, so that they can kind of manage and share risk, and also, probably more importantly, so that they can share innovation. So there is a big move. That said, there's still 40% that are desperately clinging to their practices, and those are the guys that need help. When we talk to doctors in my business, they say the same things every time we ask them what their biggest challenges are. I need help with promoting myself, and I need help with making money so I can continue to be in business for myself. There's also a move from a break-fix model, or just treating the illness, to prevention. And then the last big one, which is probably the biggest, and we don't have time to go into this right now, but if you think about it, I think you'll understand. Moving from outcome-based care to, moving from treatment-based care to outcome-based care. And I think the word in the industry is value-based care, VBC. But this changed the reward system for the entire profession. It's a major shift, and it will change. It will create a greater move to preventative, and it will create a greater shift to better health care for all of us, and better health care and more opportunities for entrepreneurs to really participate in that space. So with that said, I wanted to start with the panel, and the first place I wanted to start was just with specific feedback for some of the presenters. Things that you saw that you really loved about what they were doing and how they approached it, or some constructive feedback to help them in their efforts to grow. So maybe we'll start with you, Russ.
Yeah, I thought they were all pretty well done. Presentations, I think, be careful when you have a certain time slot, and make sure you fit that time slot. You can go a little bit under, but you shouldn't go over, because then you're rushed, and that's hard to work. Some of the fonts were a little small, hard to read, so be mindful of the mechanism, how you're going to be presenting as well. I think probably the most important thing, and some of you covered it really well, some maybe not as well, is the special sauce, or what is it that's proprietary, and how is that proprietary? Is it patent protected? Is it trade secrets or know-how? Is it just a ton of work being done that would take a lot of resources to replicate? So emphasizing that, I think, is very important.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Okay. All right. Yes, we're gonna share the mics. I have 3 of them up here, but you guys have to share too. So.
You could get one of them in the wireless, and then.
I don't want to play with technology right now. We're on a roll. So yeah, please share. If you can't hear, just speak up at the back, or on the side.
Yeah, I share Russ's feedback. I thought zeroing in on what is specifically unique about the solution is really important. There's thousands, companies like ours at Henry Schein, everything that's going on in healthcare comes over the wall, everything. And there are thousands and thousands of applications and wearables and IoT, you name it, it's coming over the wall. So I think it's really important to focus on what differentiates you. And I also thought, just a slight critique, that some of the presentations were a little light on the sales model. Maybe it's just my focus because we're a big distribution company, but I was looking for how is this going to get sold, and why did you select the particular sales model?
I echo some of the sentiments about the presentations. I think they're very good. It's always interesting to see someone with a different solution to a different problem. When you see a tagline and you expect it to be something you've seen before. And with some of the slides and the time constraints, making sure that things are legible is important. Touching on the marketing, what Bruce said, I think it's also important to talk about elements of your proprietary elements and the barriers to entry for other competitors, but also what that sales cycle looks like. I understand an investor presentation is not a customer marketing presentation, but to make it stronger, if you can explain, this is the valuable elements of what we're doing, and here's how we communicate that to the client base. That's very important, because you want your investor to understand that fundamental business model, if not to go into all the details that you would if you were trying to actually sell a product. And overall, they were very good presentations.
Okay. Now, so this is great, actually, guys, because a lot of times in these forums, we dive right heavily into the industry, and we start to lose sight of what you need to do to actually get there from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So you guys have pointed out all of the important things, right? You're looking for a strong management team. You're looking for people in the industry who've done it before. You're looking for a presentation that really gets the key points across, which are, is there an intuitive marketplace? Is there a plan to get it into the marketplace? And then is there a market to buy it? So I think you guys have hit on it. This presentation is critical. Keep in mind that investors get hundreds of business cases on their desk a day, literally. They are looking for reasons to throw them out. So if you have something that can be short, to the point, and compelling, it's really important. And I know this is your lifeblood. You want to tell them everything, but they don't really need to hear everything right up front. 2 or 3 key points, get to that, get them interested, and then when they do due diligence, they'll get to all the details. So that was excellent. Thank you, guys. I'm going to ask, I have tons of questions here, but I'm going to ask one more, but then I really want to get it out to the audience. And I really just want to get a sense of the kind of the investment climate. So what are these guys, trying to sell into or buy into?
So it's a pretty frothy market right now. I'd say it is a seller's market. A lot of multiples, sort of standard benchmarks of valuation are elevated. It's hard to get yield anywhere. So people that have capital are chasing any way they can get returns. So it's a good place. It's a good time to be seeking money. That said, it's very competitive. There's a lot of people trying to seek money, and I think the moral of the story is what you just touched on. If you are not solving a problem, you're not going to be able to sell a solution. So you need to explain what the problem is. But just because you're solving a problem doesn't mean people will buy it. And so that, we talked about that a little bit, and sort of mentioned, it's so critical to really be able to explain how you're going to go to market and why people are going to pay for your product or solution. How you're getting in front of them and what's going to compel them to spend their money. But in terms of valuation, it's the 21st Century Care Act was just passed, so I think from our perspective, there's going to be a lot more innovation, a lot more money spent in healthcare, a lot of streamlining of the FDA process, all things which I think will continue to support developments in this space. So it's a good time both from an investment perspective and I think from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much to add to what Russ said. I think we're at a time now in healthcare where the industry itself is going through this incredible disruption, which creates enormous opportunity for people who have solutions, right? So when you think we're trying to get people out of the hospital, into homes, out of expensive care settings, all of the IoT wearables, remote stuff, all the technology associated with that is freeing up a lot of money because there's a huge opportunity, and companies like ours are really paying attention to that.
Right, absolutely.
I think I read recently that the VC investment in healthcare is averaging over $1 billion a quarter since 2016. And one thing I've noticed is, besides the perpetual development to make patient diagnoses more effective, more accurate, and faster, bottlenecks are being identified. And in the big data era, a lot of people are starting to understand that there are other elements to the business that even if you can speed up the diagnostic front-end process, the patient outcome process, when you understand what that is, reducing readmissions, the costs associated with that, I'm actually seeing a trend towards not just the insurers, but the insurance buyers, besides the healthcare providers, that now are being leveraged and looking at possible opportunities to keep their workers healthy, keep their premiums down, because that cost, with the ACA and those transitions, there are tremendous opportunities to leverage these models and find out what actually works, and also from an insurance perspective, processing costs. I can't tell you how many doctors I talk to, and they say, we spend a lot of time dealing with denial of service claims, patients deal with that, and that factors into the experience, patient willingness to go to that facility, patient retention, and there's a whole host of elements that have been these effective bottlenecks where we now have an opportunity to explore them and address them. So, yeah, being in that space, this is a good time.
Okay, that's great. One last question for me, and then I'll let these guys get a chance. I wanted to ask a little bit about technology and data, because obviously many of the solutions, they range the gamut from the marketing help, which is one of the first things I said, right? How do I promote myself? That's a huge market, I think. I think it's really something that's important. All the way to deep technology SaaS solutions that help connect people, provide information, collect data, share the data. Is this really the trend? I mean, is this kind of the biggest place that money is going to go to, or are there other avenues that are more important?
I would say, yes, there's a lot. I mean, the big data era is now. I think we're, in terms of like a life cycle, a lot of people talk about how we're entering into big data. I think from a perspective of as an industry, it's maturing now.
Right.
And then the machine learning AI wave that's like integrating into this, and it'll be a big component. But there's tremendous, to touch on sort of what I said before, but there's a lot of opportunity there because everyone wants to know what's working and where they're losing time and money.
Right.
So if you can explore that, which big data allows, and then also another big advantage anyone can say from the investor perspective, the quickness to market. There's a quickness to market. There's a low startup cost typically, lower maintenance and overhead costs, and that's very attractive from an investor perspective because it accelerates the maturity life cycle for a company, as well as maturity to acquisition and maturity to IPO.
I think, from my perspective, again, I think we're all similar in terms of our approach. Washing cost out of the system is huge. And so a lot of the technology you're seeing come around now is to wash cost out of the system and make things happen faster, right, for lower cost. But I also think that there's a lot of focus now on the science of genomics and proteomics and so on in terms of faster diagnostics, things like cancers and other serious diseases. The healthcare industry, I think, is sort of waking up to the fact that maybe a cure for cancer is not tomorrow. And although huge money should and is going into that, the reality is we do have the ability to cure cancers in stage 0 and 1. And so getting those new diagnostic tests is critical, and I think there's a lot of money behind that as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anything else to add, Russ?
No, that's all covered.
Okay. Yep, I think that was pretty comprehensive. So one thing you touched on, I just wanted to reinforce, because somebody said it earlier, aging baby boomers. I mean, I know that's a common thread that people talk about, but I think our medical technology has increased the length of life, and really probably, similar to what you're saying, has to increase the quality of life at that advanced age. So that's, I think, another big challenge and another huge opportunity, I think, for a lot of firms. So I do want to talk about disruption in a few minutes and maybe regulations. We can touch on that, but do you guys have things you want to talk about? Because I think it's probably more important what you're thinking out there. Yes?
How, in all of this technology, how is the shared data going to be protected at all different, on the devices we talk about and on the doctor's network and the hospital network and these care facilities? I mean, it seems like we're spreading out the data to be shared, which is a great thing, but in today's world of data security, what are we doing there?
Right, so how is that data protected for all these devices? Personally, I have no idea, but hopefully you do.
Well, I mean, there are certain standards, right? I mean, there are HIPAA standards and so on and so forth, and there are obviously standards of how data protection is done in the industry. That said, they're not good enough at this point. And there's a wrestling match between us wanting to free up data so that research institutions can share data and cures can be created quicker, and the real concern, the very real concern about protecting patient privacy and so on. I mean, these are open questions, but I don't think this is hard to do. But obviously, when companies like ours, when we take on new products and their IT products, we put the third parties, sometimes the very small startup organizations, through a very exhaustive cybersecurity process, because a company the size of Henry Schein, if we push something out there and it isn't secure, obviously the liability is huge. But I think the industry is wrestling that. I mean, you see big companies getting hacked every day, right? I mean, and these companies theoretically have pretty good protections in place, right? So this is something the industry wrestles with. There are, however, standards of protecting data both at rest and in motion. And again, folks like us, we're constantly looking at that and making sure things are buttoned up.
To add a bit of an addendum to that, for the entrepreneurs, something that's happening now is the insurance industry is starting to mature along with the cybersecurity element. And if you're an entrepreneur, while there are the hosting services and their encryption, their data and compliance is fundamental. I mean, this is something you absolutely need. Beyond that, ensuring that your liabilities are covered. And cybersecurity insurance is an interesting three-tier system where it's the notification, it's the discovery, it's the response litigation, ensuring that you're protected properly, because there are a lot of ways that can go back and forth, and blanket liability now is transitioning to be more sophisticated in that sector. So it's just a note to be mindful of.
Exactly. Yes?
Given the uncertainty of the current political landscape, ACA and other regulations, have you seen that affect valuation, the flow of people trying to get deals closed quicker or waiting to see if it's going to create higher valuations with reduced regulation and better business climates?
Right, so basically the question was, how does the ACA in its kind of comings and goings affect valuations of companies, better or worse?
I think from a perspective of the pharmaceutical industry, everyone's well aware of the very public exposure they've had lately, and the excessive costs as I guess, presented. That's had an effect there. Overall costs, I've heard rumblings for a long time now about the impact it would have on the medical devices market. Frankly, I really haven't seen that. But really, from an investor's perspective, that's opportunity. You know, if there's an opportunity where someone can't market a company the traditional way they would have done, that creates another opportunity for someone else to say, yes, we can market this at half that price, still be within compliance. Within the next few months, it really depends upon what changes. You know, it's very hard to forecast what will happen with the next administration.
Yeah, and my sense is, if you create a product that is very specific to the ACA, I'd be nervous right now. But the train has left the station, right? I mean, on the main elements of what the ACA is supposed to solve or starting to solve, that train has left the station, right? We do want to wash costs out of the system. We do want to diagnose people earlier. The science and the technology is there. The opportunities, I think, are not all that affected. Whatever Congress and the new president does, the goals are actually the same, right?
Absolutely.
Create better health care for lower cost, sooner.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right.
Yeah, I think I haven't really seen a direct correlation between the political changes and the marketplace. I think there's a lot of push and pull. I think there's headline grabbing guys like Martin Shkreli or the EpiPen situation, and lots of incidents of oncology drugs that are hundreds of thousands of dollars per patient. Sort of on the negative aspect towards the issue, but then you had a Republican-led Congress now with the Republican president. I think you'll see more deregulation this week with the passage of a bill. So I think there's a lot of push and pull. But I think the real exciting thing is that technology is moving ahead regardless of who's in the Oval Office. And there's so many exciting developments we see all the time. We saw some today. There's a tremendous opportunity, I think, to advance diagnosing things earlier, better, faster, curing things better, using your own oncology, your own immune system to fight cancer. There's some really exciting things happening that I think are outweighing anything that's politically driving this plan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, the only thing I might add to that is on the regulatory side. I mean, as business owners, we hate regulations because they create cost in our business, but they do serve a purpose, right? They protect consumers, they protect all of us. So there is some balance. Hopefully our politicians will figure that out. But as we build our products, if we are conscious of them, that saves us time, effort, money, because we're in compliance. We don't have to get in compliance, when we get to the point of getting our stuff out there or going through due diligence or anything else. So again, it's something else we should always be thinking about because it is part of life in corporate America. Okay, another question? Yes?
I have a question about end user experience, the importance of it, and excellence in that space. And can you say who right now gets it and who does it really well?
This is probably the most important question of the day. Focus on the customer, right? That's something that I probably should have said right at the beginning, but as entrepreneurs, again, focus on the customer. What's the value you provide to them? Not what are we going to get out of it by doing some cool products, right? Really important. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead of you there.
Yeah, it's a perfect question. I agree. Companies like ours who tend to, in many cases, sell products that other people do. The differentiator for a company like Henry Schein is that customer experience. When we talk to our customers, they like us, and sometimes it's a factor of the technology itself, right? The user interface and the workflow is smarter and better and more intuitive. Sometimes it's just simple fundamentals of how do you treat your customers, right? And how focused are you on that customer experience? I think a lot of businesses begin to mechanize as they get really big, and they don't have the systems in place to be one-on-one with customers. And at the end of the day, it's simple fundamentals, I think, in terms of how you treat customers, and that goes to sales and customer support, implementations, training on new technologies, and so on. But some of it also has to do with how the technologies operate. Are they reliable, right? Are they intuitive to use? Do the companies, and we talked a little bit about this already, how are you positioning the products and to whom are you positioning them to? I think young entrepreneurs probably spend not enough time on positioning. It is absolutely critical that the target people that you are trying to address, people you're trying to sell to, absolutely understand what does this thing do, how does it do it, how do I learn more about it, how do I obtain it, and what does it cost? All of those elements of positioning, I think, are critical.
Other questions? All right, we have a quiet crowd. It's a good thing I came with 5 sheets of questions here. So anyway, I did mention disruption, because I do think that's always, again, something to think about. So we always, I'll use the easy example, right? Apple, right? Apple is the one that creates products that if we didn't know we needed it, then, like, we had to have it. Their iWatch launch was another one of these things where it's like, you know, when you need a watch, that's your word for. But it does a whole bunch of other things. Now, it wasn't successful in and of itself, but I mean, go to any store, walk through Macy's, Fossil, you know, every major watchmaker now has some kind of a smartwatch. So they, again, have disrupted the industry, changed the way we think about things, and changed behavior. How is that happening in healthcare? And what are, you know, any important trends or things for people to be aware of or look out for?
Sorry, no.
What I was going to say is that, you know, one of the best pieces of advice I've heard for any entrepreneur is that you should run your company with the creativity and innovation of Apple. You should run it with the current area of Intel. And as someone who came from the intellectual property background, you mentioned disruption. I think a key element to touch on is you spoke about the special sauce and what's proprietary, your differentiator. Understanding that landscape. Beyond that, understanding what a good intellectual property attorney is, because of the risks involved with going out and trying to sell a product before you're ready. A lot of that has to do with Bruce was talking about, you know, understanding your business, you know, where you are with respect to your competition, and understanding that, you know, there are different types of intellectual property and there are different elements to how your estate is secured. If you're in the software space, a largely algorithmic space, it's much more difficult. And the term is novel combination of known concepts, right? That's where you see most of the patents being issued in the software space. You don't want to be in a situation where you're in a branding war, because the marketing costs, and we've seen some companies that have had to go through this where they'll raise over $100 million and that doesn't cover the marketing costs, because in their mind, it's how they have to get the product to the users, and there's going to be a nice long lag before they can actually realize profit. So from a disruptive technologies perspective, that's important, and ensuring that you position yourself so that you have advocates, you know, in the healthcare space, integrating with workflow. If you're too disruptive, can be very difficult. Nurses in hospitals, you know, working with the Nurses Association, they always mention alarm fatigue. If you overwhelm someone with notifications, it becomes a boy who cried wolf situation. So understanding that client and meeting their needs, increasing their ability to do their job more effectively, more efficiently, and then allowing them to become advocates for you. Because ultimately, they're going to be your best marketing source, the people that love your product. And that can be difficult, but you have to understand them before you can do it.
You touched on something I thought, which just gave me some flashback to an earlier period of my life when I used to run a software company. My salespeople would come back sometimes and just be higher than a kite because they had a great experience. They didn't close the deal, but the people at the practice were real excited. And invariably, those opportunities did not turn into sales. And people would question why not. And I think you hit it. And it's because when they're watching you as the presenter show the software, show the technology, and they're wowed by it, it's not equivalent to a purchase. They may think, wow, this stuff's amazing. They're also saying to themselves, can I do it? Is this something that will fit into my workflow in the practice or in the situation that I'm in? And so one of the pieces of advice I think I give the young entrepreneurs, many of which I heard today are going to be sort of direct models. When you're with customers, you have to keep that in mind, which is they have to be able to think of themselves as experiencing using this. It has to fit into what they do. And I think the other piece of it is, there's so many new things coming. There's so much opportunity. You have to say to yourself, what problem am I solving, right? I mean, Steve Jobs was famous for, saying that he doesn't use the voice of customer. He doesn't care about the voice of customer because he's going to tell them what they want and then they're going to love it. And all right, so we're not all Steve Jobs. So you have to, I think, balance voice of customer, which is critically important, and what they are saying, with the fact that customers don't necessarily know what's on the bleeding edge of technology today, and they can't necessarily map it to solving a problem. But doesn't it all come down to that opportunity is the solving of a problem that needs to be solved? And so those opportunities that make it, obviously you need a great business model and all the other things, but you have to be solving a problem, right? And you have to be doing it in a way that's compelling, and then you have to be able to position it in a way where you're communicating with people so they get it.
A couple, 2 points I want to make about disruption. One is, I guess a little over 10 years ago, I was working in the computer networking space. So in the routers, switches, firewalls, things like that. 10 years ago, it was still evolving pretty well. So there were a lot of disruptive businesses that would come to us that want us to distribute their products. And Cisco at that point in time was the market leader by far. But Cisco cost at least double everybody else. So people would come and say, we got this great firewall. It does 10 times more than Cisco can do. It costs half the price. Everyone will buy it. And it was hard to sell. And the reason was, we used to say, is nobody ever got fired. No IT manager ever got fired for implementing Cisco, because it was the standard, it was a known name, it was safe. Even though it was more money, maybe less effective, it was a known thing. So if you've got a disruptive technology, it doesn't mean people are going to listen to you if you're going to displace the incumbent who's sort of been doing this for a long time. The other thing is, if it's a disruptive technology, the sales chain may be disrupted also, and it's complicated to know. You got to sort of know who your customer is. So let's say you're selling into a big hospital. Are you trying to market products to the purchasing department? Are you trying to deal with the IT department? You're trying to deal with executives. You have to go to distributors to that hospital. So if you got disruptive technology, knowing how to get it into that market is not so obvious at times, and that's important to do a lot of research on.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That is tough. Are you suggesting perhaps you work with the incumbent? I mean, in a lot of cases, the incumbent is the target for an exit, right, a sale down the road. But do you seek those guys out early in the process, or is it better to avoid them?
Depends on the thing. I mean, one of the presentations talked about their 510K, the predicate device was the market leader. I think that's a great, first of all, the 510K is a much easier path to go on, but more importantly, now you've got that as your proof point to say, not only do we say it, but the FDA said it. So I think it depends on the situation. I think it's hard when you're young and vulnerable to go to those guys because they'll maneuver around you if they want to. It's tricky. Right. Even if they are ultimately your exit strategy, I think it's timing is important.
Yeah, so you have to prove the model, show that it works first, have some competitive differentiation.
Right.
All right, that makes perfect sense. I just one highlight on the sales process too that you mentioned, or that whole thing. Sales is a process, right? And selling to a client and selling to an investor, it has similar approaches. Some of the elements are different, but the approach is the same. It's a people business, right? You're trying to persuade somebody to see it your way. So the value has to be based on that. What do they get out of it? How does it fit into their operation? Not, I've got a really cool thing and you should want it, right? So if you focus that way, again, what we said earlier, you may not get all of the points out that you want to, all the cool stuff, but if you get the 1 or 2 or 3 that are important to them, you are well on your way. And in sales, we used to call that happy years, right? You hear what you want to hear, you come back, I got the sale, and then it doesn't happen. So it's much more to that. Okay, other questions out here? Yes?
We're creating a disruptive device. It's a wearable auto-injector bracelet. It's designed to disrupt EpiPens. So we're looking at, when we're presenting for funding, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. We are in a really good position to either license or take it all the way through manufacturing. Are we doing ourselves a disservice by presenting both options at the same time in our deck? Should we be focusing on one or the other?
I would say no. One of the key questions for anyone who's running a company is to constantly ask, what business am I in? And is it a product? Is it a service? Is it something that you're going to license? No, it's important because from an investor perspective, to know that the option is out there and which road you're gonna go down, if you can show that each model stands on its own legs, that's important. And understanding from a financial perspective, when you financially model it, what's gonna make the most sense for you, that's also important. So I think it's, for me, it's an opportunity. And again, it also depends upon what stage you are in the company. If it sounds like it's very early, yeah, I would say leave those as options.
So I would agree with that. I think as you get further down the road, most young companies lack resources, people, and there's only so many hours in a day to do so many things, and so there's also the real true concept of the fact that you can dilute yourself, right? It's the concept of I don't do anything really well, I do a lot of things a little well, and it's competitive space. So I think I would totally agree. In the early stages, you want to keep your options open because you really don't know which opportunity is going to open the door. But at some point, you have to make a decision because you're limited in terms of how many people can do so many things at once, right?
Yeah, it's hard to answer that without more information, but you might find some people that say, I don't want licensing, or I do want licensing, and if you tell me both, you're not focused enough. That's a possibility, but if the truth is, both are pathways that you're exploring. I think at the end of the day, the truth is best representation. I would continue.
Absolutely. Do what you do best and do it better than anybody else until you get big enough that you can do everything. How are we doing on time? Good? Okay, more questions? Yes, right here.
Talk about investors. The question is, what we found when we're raising money, we find it challenging that a lot of investors are more comfortable investing $5-6 million in round A or B. Why are they uncomfortable spending less money, getting more equity in seed round? So I'd like to hear why they feel more confident with that.
Well, a lot of it's depending on the audience. If you go into a large institution that's got $100 million fund, let's say, then $1 million investment, they don't have the resources to deal with that. It won't move the needle, quote unquote. So a lot of it depends on who you're talking to. I don't think it's necessarily the dollar amount by itself. It's going to be a different dollar amount. It's going to be a different animal to two different investors. And then the same thing. Some people like to see investments. Some people don't. They want to see a bunch of other people kind of put money in, before, validating it in that respect before they'll put their own money in. So I wouldn't necessarily correlate it with the dollar amount directly.
Yeah, I mean, our company doesn't do that type of investment. We don't invest early stage. But when I used to be in that space and looking for money, what the VCs would always say to me is, we can't afford to do $100,000 or $500,000 because we don't have the time. It's not worth it, right? So it comes down to the fact that they would rather make fewer bets of a larger scale, right, and have a few of those really pay off, than have all of these different little things going on. It's just not the way that they're built, and it's too expensive in terms of their time and their efforts.
But there's also a tremendous amount of syndication in the VC realm. So you do have a lot of typical seed investors, angel investors that will lead, and they'll be connected to those larger groups. They might be part of those groups as well. And what that allows for them to have market leaders. And so if they know someone's very good in a certain sector, they have a high degree of confidence, and they might have an interval where they feel comfortable investing, but that allows them to follow with a much bigger bet. Because the leading edge, especially from funds and from a fund perspective, with the way returns have been, there's a lot of risk mitigation going on right now. And a lot of companies, speaking of regulatory environments, what might happen, what's happening now with the DOL has changed the way companies have been comfortable being in that space, what it means to be a registered investment advisor, and what it means to provide value. So you're seeing people move away from taking a riskier bet to make a larger, smarter bet. And Russ is completely on point where timing is the time they have when they invest.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just to reiterate one point, it's also different levels of risk at those different points. Typically, it's seed money, you're at a different stage. You have an idea that you're kind of starting to test out. When you get to the later rounds and bigger amounts of money, typically you've already proven the model, you're in operation, you've had some success, and now you're looking to grow. So, and there's no hard and fast rules about it, but generally there's different risk assessments. and points where people want to jump in. Do I want to jump in really early with a greater risk of it not succeeding, or after it's a little proven? And I'll take a little less ownership and put more money in to do that. So, did you have a question here?
Yeah, I don't know if there's an easy answer to it, maybe all of you about, but it seems like, we've talked about stuff, that, you looked at, whether is this disruptive, is the market big, there's so many factors. Are there specific hot buttons that when you look at something, you say, okay, that lets you evaluate it better, or say, well, this is the piece that I'm most interested in. In other words, how do you guys make the decision? Those that invest in the smaller stage companies.
This is probably a bit of a cliche, but unless you've got some, you get 12 patents and a bunch of trade secrets and a bunch of know-how that nobody can replicate, then really you're betting on people. So we're betting on management. So the make or break really is going to be the management team. If you've got some holes in your management team, that's probably okay. If you recognize you have those holes, you've got a plan to eventually fill the holes. But the most important thing ultimately is going to be personalities. So experience, track record, and passion, and just general chemistry when you meet somebody.
Yeah, I would have to believe that people can deliver, right? The chemistry's huge.
I'd say the thesis is going to be different for any investor. So me personally, what Russ said is a huge element for me. What is your intellectual property? What's proprietary? What do you control? What creates your moat and keeps everyone else out? Once I see that there's something fundamental there, then I can talk about business model, a reasonable business model. I'll get a pro forma and I'll know that the pro forma is probably realistic and have to bring it into the realm of realistic expectations. So then I prove out the business model, because the management team is always going to be a critical element. Everyone's going to be focusing on the track records there. But I don't want to go leading with the management team for a simple reason. A great management team knows how to pitch their products, so they know how to sell it, which means they know how to make money off their products. I'm a human. I want to get into the room with the investors after I'm comfortable with the fundamentals of the business and have them convince me that they can sell. And I know it's a great management team because I know those are the people that have to go out, be their own advocates, and sell the product to everyone else to prove out the models that we discussed.
Absolutely.
And just to reiterate, and not to pick on you, but one of the things I noticed in when you talk about a market size, it's one thing to talk about market sizing and just to get a sense of the largeness of the market. When I see projections with the penetration assumptions, I automatically discount those because it's just sort of a, one of these. And so when you're a startup, you don't know, you have to have something to have projections on. So it's good to base it on something. But I think it maybe to articulate it a little with some market research, with some other comparables, things like that might be a little more compelling than just we're going to get 9% market as a revenue projection.
Okay, can I give you guys one last opportunity if there's anything else you want to share with the group before Neil comes on stage and pulls us off?
I would just say thank you. This is a great opportunity. The presentations are great. I think there are a lot of good opportunities for the companies. Again, I think it always ties back to understanding your audience, whether your job as a founder or a CEO is always to bring in revenue. Right? You're either obtaining or retaining customers. Those are your two major components. And if your customer happens to be an investor who brings money to the company so you can grow, that's your audience. Understand what they want to see. Then when it comes to your audience being someone who's going to purchase whatever you're selling, it's the same thing. Understand their needs, the things they need to see, and speak to your audience. And that'll help you get through it.
Yeah, it was thank you for hosting this. This was a pleasure to be on here. But, another minor criticism, watch your acronyms just because you're in an industry and things are familiar to you, automatically what an acronym means. Your audience may not, so spell things out.
Right.
And, it's reiterating what was said. A lot of times we get so passionate we're spending 20 hours a day, 7 days a week on our business, and we see it, we know it's so great, but you have to sort of step back from that and always put yourself in the viewpoint of your audience.
Right.
What is your audience looking for, and am I compelling to them? Just because I know it's great, it's hard to convey that. So try to put yourself in their shoes and speak from that perspective whenever possible.
Yeah, I would say one thing, just sort of detail to what you said, which is when companies come to us and we see, you were mentioned before, what we see, just about everything that's happening in healthcare is thrown over the wall at us. A lot of times when we zero in with these young companies, I think as a way of impressing us, when we look at their financial models, you know, they're big hockey sticks. And I want to advise people that that's probably not a good idea. Because I think it probably turns off investors. It certainly turns us off. When people are that unrealistic, where, you know, this year the revenues are going to be 50,000, and next year it's going to be 22 million. We kind of wonder, huh? And we think at that point that a management team that is that exuberant is probably unrealistic. And so it's obviously important to be optimistic, passionate, great advocate for your product, and all the other things we mentioned. But when you go too far, I think it can work. It can work as a negative.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one last thought I will leave you with: the same way you approach your clients, you target your market, you find clients where you have a fit. You should do the same with your investors. Research investors. Find ones that invest in your space. Don't just go shotgun to everybody who has the name investor next to their business card, right? Find the right ones, because that'll save you a lot of time and it'll save them a lot of time. So thank you, gentlemen. This was really fabulous.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you to all the panelists. Sure. So if I could just add a couple of quick points on these comments on that last point. You know, Bruce, I find this a double-edged sword, right, when I work with companies, because everybody has these hockey stick projections. Generally, they're discounted, you know, by the recipients to some extent, to some considerable extent. So it's like, if you go in with, you know, flatter projections, then I think, you know, when I represent investors, well, if they're only projecting 30% a year growth, when we discount that, what are they not going to grow at all? You know, now, you know, 50,000 to 22 million is obviously unrealistic, but you know, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword that has to be managed carefully. And what I find is the best approach to that is the same approach that I recommend generally to building your whole business plan, which is from the ground up rather than the top down. From the top down, to say, well, there's $1 billion market and I'm going to capture 1% or 5%. That's bullshit, right? You know, that's just making it up. On the other hand, if you say, well, I have this product and, you know, my first round of most likely customers are these 10 customers, and I think I can sell so many units for whatever price within the next 12 months to these 10 customers. And then once I have those, I'm going to go on to the next level, and then I'm going to set up a distribution network or whatever it may be. That's how you build a business plan and projections that I find to be far more compelling and persuasive and credible than I'm going to get 1% of this market, right? So for our presenters and the entrepreneurs in the audience, whatever it's worth, that's my 2 cents. But thank you guys all. Thank you to the panelists. That was great. And thank you to all of our presenters who I think did an outstanding job, especially in showing up on time and keeping to the deadlines of 7 minutes, which I know is a challenge. I'm just kidding. The content was fantastic also. Once again, thank you to our sponsors on the screen here for all of their support. We couldn't do this without them. I want to remind everyone that our next Capital Forum will be March 10th, the second Friday of the month. Our next LICA event will be the next in our series of entrepreneurial education and mentoring events, which we do in collaboration with the New York Institute of Technology. On January 12th, we will address accounting systems, cash flow, and financing alternatives for early stage companies. We encourage you all to join us. That will be held at the Harry Schul Hall on the campus of NYIT, January 12th. You can always refer to our website at licapital.org for event and registration details. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Again, all of our presenting companies will be available after the event now to have engaging discussions with anyone that has any further questions or would like to meet with them or set up a follow-up. We'll see you all at our next events. Thanks for joining us.
That sounds good. That's good.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Really? That's and they're probably trying to experience. I mean, I'm looking at the
When we do these forums, we usually pick different industries, right? So we do healthcare.
How are you?
Yeah.
Long time today.
Right, yeah, and you're on Long Island.
It was nice.
Yes. Oh, good. So we usually do a call for presenters before. So if you had to come in,
Your topic would have been great. 50% of it would have been great.
yeah.
This is very
We do them every quarter, so.
What's this one?
We haven't decided yet. We do healthcare and like.
Well, that could be, that actually could be. Uber's not available anymore. That could be interesting.
Something different. Because we do a lot of technical, and then we fill it in with consumer products.
Very interesting. You're probably going to have a nice word. Projecting out what is Yep, that really
or naloxone, or any one of the medication
I shop there too. I think this one might be more. But I like it. I love it.
For our next meeting, we've already put in the device, and we don't need to put in the market other price, we can kind of keep. Well, we don't ourselves, work like acquisitions and our, like, we put together these forums to help people and each other, but I don't specifically have a person I could,
No, I just you knew that
Yeah.
I could hear opposed to walking up and
Yeah, if you join, introduce you kind of shine. And if you join, like, if you join as a member, you have access to the membership list. So, if you look on our website, you come to the forums for free, we sold the memberships together. We're gonna give him a box of candy.
I just joined the treasurer.
Just join. Oh, they told him he has to sell memberships. No, if you join, you get to come to forums for free, but you also get access to the membership portal, which people find useful because, obviously the contact info is in there.
I like the question we were trying to, I really don't know them well. I know them very well, but I do know they make a lot, they have a separate group that makes concessions. So they are a good.
See over there?
Now, you might have one in front, but if not, you can probably reach it.
He's the balding guy.
Just hold it in the middle. You have the older right here.
is he standing right there with the ties in the middle?
No, I can look with you.
I haven't seen it. But they do a lot of investigations, especially with something, they're a medical device company also. They're involved. That's why I'm suggesting that maybe you first reach out to them.
Hopefully he's still one of the Shine execs is on our board. He's
not
Oh,
here
yeah,
today,
so-
he's traveling.
He drives
So we have a pretty good relationship. But he's out there.
Also, how about
So,
Something that would be with him. Surprised he's not here, Mark.
They
Is he away?
do, I don't know, they do a lot of like field work, and that obviously is the proper investment, but I'm not sure if he's focused on medical devices industry or in the tubular industry.
He's on our board also. So again, if you joined as a member,
And that's,
it's not expensive. I'm going blank, $200 a year, something even less.
oh, great, oh, good. So it's like, oh no, we're
No, it's not.
startup, but
Very
like,
Yeah,
oh no,
no, I
that's
know.
perfect,
Very
perfect.
It's all our, everything, we don't replace, we're not profits.
I'm like, this is
We're not doing this to make money on forums, we don't make any money on it. It's really, you know, it's the sponsors. So, but it's for making relationships. So if I see him, I I just met him in one
I don't see him.
yeah, quick. I just met him. You know.
This seems like a wonderful group to be a part of. It's a great group. Is this still on? It is not. Okay.
Probably rather power by now.
Yeah. I know. Right? I know.
personal manual to get that content to, you know, on the new letterhead, updated, such and so I realized that you can do a lot with you've talked about or they try to figure out I have articles on how to raise money, misconceptions about raising money. That's actually, I have all kinds of content. You know, it's been lots of articles about the news days. I have a lot of that stuff. I just marshal I will, it may take a little bit of time, but I will get together, I'm a big believer in using all